The rain in Savannah had a way of slowing time. It draped the city in a soft, melancholic veil, turning cobblestone streets into mirrors of blurred light and memory. That evening, as the smooth jazz from the lobby bar echoed faintly through the gilded halls of the Velvet Swan Hotel, Natalia Harris stood by the window, her figure wrapped in a trench coat still damp from the drizzle. She wasn't supposed to be here, not back in Savannah, not at the place where everything had fallen apart. 6 years had passed since the Harris family name was whispered with reverence. Since Harris Global Industries collapsed under a cloud of scandal and betrayal, 6 years have passed. Her father was accused of embezzling $50 million. Her younger sister Emma vanished the same night. Her engagement to Nathan Hudson, heir to Dominion Bank, was abruptly shattered. And Natalia, once a golden girl of Georgia high society, left alone, pregnant, disgraced, and with nothing but a suitcase and the bitter taste of abandonment. Now here she was again. Only this time she wasn't the same woman. "Mom." A soft voice tugged at her coat. Natalia looked down to see Caleb, her 6-year-old son, peering up at her with solemn eyes, too wise for his age. Zoe, his twin sister, stood just behind him, a pink lollipop in one hand, her curls bouncing as she shifted from foot to foot. "Are you nervous?" Caleb asked. Natalia crouched to his level. "Maybe a little," she admitted. "But sometimes we must face the places that hurt us to find the truth." Caleb tilted his head, studying her. Then he said in that unshakably calm tone of his, "I ran a diagnostic on the hotel network. It's not very secure." A chuckle escaped her lips, the first real laugh of the day. "Sweetheart, we're here for dinner, not cyber espionage." "Just in case," he said with a shrug. Zoe tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Is the fancy man going to be here?" The one from the picture. Natalia froze. The picture. Caleb found the one last week while digging into old hotel security archives. A single blurry frame taken from a lobby camera 6 years ago. 2 figures, a woman in a silver dress barely standing, and a man in a tailored black suit, his face angled down as he reached to catch her. She hadn't remembered his face. But when Caleb enhanced the image, it all came flooding back. The night her world collapsed, and the stranger who held her for a fleeting, forgotten moment. The elevator doors opened to the hotel's rooftop lounge, the Swan's Nest, buzzing with quiet opulence. A charity gala was underway. Laughter danced in the air, alongside the soft clink of champagne flutes, men in designer suits, women in silk and diamonds. Natalia walked in slowly, her black dress hugging her figure with elegance. Heads turned, some with recognition, others with speculation. She ignored them. She had come for answers. And then she saw him. Elias Sterling, CEO of Sterling & Royce Capital, billionaire, strategist. The kind of man who made headlines simply by showing up. He stood by the bar, whiskey in hand, speaking to a senator with effortless charm. Tall, impeccably dressed. His ice blue eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. The world went quiet. For a second neither moved. Then slowly he stepped forward. "Miss Harris," he said, his voice a low, smooth cadence that vibrated deeper than the music. "Mr. Sterling," she replied, her voice steady. "We've met before." Natalia smiled faintly. "Do you?" He studied her. "There was a night, a storm, a hotel. You wore silver." Her heart skipped. He remembered. "And you," she said, "caught me before I fell. And you disappeared before I could ask your name." Chamamur. Elsewhere in the hotel, Caleb sat quietly with a tablet in hand. Zoe curled beside him. On-screen lines of code ran across his custom interface. He wasn't just playing. He was probing. into the Sterling and Royce internal server. 5 seconds. That was all he needed. Just long enough to search the folder marked HGI, Acquisition Timeline, before encrypting his trail. Inside, he found a hidden sub-file labeled S-37. And then the screen blinked red. Intrusion detected. Caleb's fingers flew over the screen. Redirect. Re-encrypt. Mask the signal. Shift server location. "Zoe," he whispered, nudging his sister. "We need to go. Now." "Did you break it again?" She yawned. "No, but someone knows I was there." Back on the rooftop, Elias leaned closer. "I remember your eyes. They haunted me for weeks after that night." Natalia met his gaze. "People don't usually remember ghosts. You're not a ghost. You're very much here. And you look like someone who came back with purpose." She didn't answer, because how could she explain that the collapse of her family wasn't just financial ruin? It was personal betrayal, that her father's disgrace had been orchestrated, that someone had wanted Harris Global to fall, and that in the ruins she found herself pregnant with twins, uncertain who the father was, and that last week her son told her it might be Elias Sterling. As they spoke, William Sterling, Elias's father, watched from afar. His expression was unreadable. He turned to Sophia Morgan, poised in crimson and diamonds. "Find out who she is." Sophia narrowed her eyes, already working on it. That night, as Natalia returned to their modest rental on the city's east side, Caleb was waiting. "Did you talk to him?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes." "And he remembers me?" Caleb nodded, then turned his tablet to face her. "I found something." She sat beside him. The screen showed a file header, S-37 Confidential. Harris Acquisition. Sterling and Royce, Morgantech Dominion Bank. Natalia's breath caught. 3 names. The same 3 entities that walked away unscathed when her father was destroyed. "Do you think he knows?" Caleb asked. Natalia looked at the screen, then at the moonlight pouring through the window. She said slowly that we just reopened a game that never ended. Sometimes stories don't begin at the beginning. Sometimes they begin with a single stolen night. A memory both faded and unforgettable. A stranger who may not have been so strange. And a child who dares to chase the truth. If this moment pulled at your heart or made you want more, let us know. Like this video if you're ready to uncover what Caleb finds next. Comment on your favorite line, or guess what the S-37 file might reveal. And don't forget to follow our channel so you won't miss what happens when Natalia steps into the lion's den. This is only the beginning. Tuesday morning wrapped Savannah in a golden warmth that did little to soften the glint of the Sterling and Royce headquarters. Once again, Natalia Harris stood beneath the towering glass facade, the mirrored walls now less intimidating, though no less cold. If she had learned anything from her years navigating loss and survival, it was this power always looked polished from the outside. Today, she no longer stood at the edge. She was inside. Her ID badge, a temporary placeholder clipped to her lapel, flashed green as she entered the executive floor. She had only been at the firm a day, but whispers curled like smoke around her presence. No one could place her exactly. That was precisely how she wanted it. At 8:00 a.m., sharp, her schedule began. Miss Jordan Elias Sterling greeted her with his daily brief as she entered his office. "You've made an impression." Natalia handed him the morning report, hopefully not the wrong kind. He smiled faintly, motioning for her to sit. You're competent, efficient. You handled Sophia yesterday like a trained diplomat. Natalia kept her tone neutral. I was raised to smile through sharp words. And you have excellent composure. She met his eyes. I've had years to practice. For a moment, he didn't speak. The silence crackled. There was something there, a recognition neither of them could fully voice. Then he leaned back. What are your long-term goals, Miss Jordan? Natalia folded her hands calmly. To understand the systems I work within, and to never be at the mercy of someone else's deception. Elias blinked slowly, as if hearing an echo he couldn't place. You remind me of someone. Before he could continue, his phone rang. The Hudson file, he said, then looked up. We'll continue this later. Natalia exited quietly, but inside her heart thudded. The Hudson file. That name still had the power to make her skin go cold. Across town, Caleb adjusted his headset and logged into the secure network he'd built on a second-hand laptop. Around him, wires hummed faintly tiny green lights, blinking in a quiet rhythm. Zoe was curled up with a picture book on the couch, one eye peeking toward her brother. She could sense when Caleb's mind wasn't just playing. He was digging again. Inside Sterling and Royce's private server, Caleb had discovered a dataset encrypted under a false invoice trail. The file was labeled S-37 Termination Schedule. He didn't understand all the terms, but he understood his mother's name was on it, along with Harris Global, a plan time-stamped months before the scandal ever surfaced, and a sender tag that chilled him, W. Sterling at Sterling Royce. Come. At lunch, Natalia found herself summoned by Sophia Morgan to a meeting. The setting, a minimalist glass conference room on the 25th floor. The view was breathtaking. The atmosphere is suffocating. Let's chat, Sophia said, crossing one elegant leg over the other. Her tone was friendly. Her eyes were weapons. Natalia nodded. Of course. I like to know who's close to Elias. I'm his assistant, not his confidant. Are you sure? Natalia smiled politely. Quite. Sophia leaned forward slightly. There's something familiar about you, but I can't place it. Faces tend to blend in, Savannah, don't they? Sophia laughed lightly. Some do, but not yours. The silence stretched. Natalia offered no reaction. Sophia eventually rose. Enjoy your time here, Miss Jordan, while it lasts. Later that day, Elias asked Natalia to review a folder marked Legacy Mergers. Inside were acquisition contracts, risk assessments, and a classified Project Ember sealed file. She didn't open it. Not yet. But she memorized the tagline on the cover, co-authored by W. Sterling, N. Hudson, and D. Morgan. The Unholy Trinity. That evening, back at their apartment, Natalia sat with Caleb as he explained the file he'd found. His fingers moved swiftly, pulling up charts, crosslinks, and archived correspondence. He said they were preparing to take Harris Global before the audit started. This wasn't a fall. It was a hit. Natalia looked at her son, his small hands doing the work of grown men. Her heart ached. You shouldn't have to do this, she whispered. Someone has to, Caleb replied. They tried to erase you, but you're not gone. You're right here. Natalia swallowed back tears. We need more proof that they can't bury. Then we go deeper. Wednesday morning began with rain. Not the soft drizzle of memory, but a sharp, steady downpour. Natalia arrived at the office early. Her badge beeped. The glass doors slid open, and standing just inside the lobby was William Sterling. He gave her a thin smile. My son is taken with you. Natalia inclined her head. I'm honored. Don't be. That kind of attention doesn't last. I'm not here for attention. He leaned closer. Then make sure you stay out of the shadows you don't understand. Natalia walked away without responding. But her mind was already moving. She would need allies. And soon. That afternoon, Claire Bennett called from Chicago. You made it in? Yes. And Natalia exhaled. It goes deeper than I feared. Do you want out? No, Natalia said. Her voice was steady. I want justice. As the sun dipped below the Savannah skyline, Natalia stared out the office window. Her reflection gazed back at her half-shadowed, half-illuminated. She thought of Elias, of Caleb, of the night 6 years ago. She had become a ghost to survive. But now, she was flesh and fire. And she was done hiding. It was past midnight in Savannah, and the rain had returned, not the soft kind that whispered memories, but a persistent drizzle that clung to windows like unanswered questions. In a modest apartment on the city's quieter east side, Caleb Harris sat cross-legged on the floor, the soft hum of his laptop cutting through the silence like a heartbeat. His fingers danced over the keys, eyes locked on cascading lines of code. Around him were the tools of his secret life: Ethernet cables, 2 stacked monitors, a soldering kit, and a modified tablet he built from salvaged parts. At just 6 years old, Caleb understood the concept of truth more deeply than most adults. And tonight, he planned to chase it. Are you still awake? Natalia's voice floated gently from the hallway. He didn't turn. Almost done. Natalia stepped into the room, a robe wrapped tightly around her frame. The dim glow of the screen cast blue shadows on her son's face. She watched him for a moment, his concentration quiet determination. Caleb, she said softly, you need sleep. I know just 5 more minutes. I'm tracing something. She knelt beside him. Tracing what? He pointed to the screen. Sterling and Royce has a private cloud system. The file I found, S-37, is not just about Harris Global. There's another name tied to it. A code name, Erebus. Natalia's brow furrowed. What does it mean? Caleb's eyes flicked toward her. It's a program. Something illegal. Hidden inside their security architecture. I followed the IP trail. But someone tried to block me halfway. Natalia tensed. Someone, an active defender. Not a firewall. A person. They almost caught me.
Definitely.
At the same time, high above the Savannah skyline inside the penthouse office of Sterling and Royce. Elias. Sterling stared at a blinking red dot on his monitor. Whoever it is, he murmured, they're good. Too good for a teenager. He had been monitoring the intrusion since 11:47 p.m. It wasn't the first attempt, but it was the most sophisticated. The breach had come through a hidden port, one only a handful of people knew existed. The intruder had entered silently bypast decoys and searched with chilling precision. And then just as Elias launched a traceback, the connection vanished. Whoever they were, they didn't just get lucky. They knew what to look for. His phone buzzed a message from his father. Review Erebus logs. If it leaks, we all burn. Elias closed the screen. Something didn't feel right. And for the first time in years, Elias felt like he was being hunted.
The
next morning, the sun returned to Savannah brilliant and careless. Zoe munched on cereal at the kitchen table, while Caleb sat silently, eyes on his tablet. You're quiet today, Natalia said, sipping her coffee. He saw me. Natalia stiffened. Elias? I think so. He tried to trace me. Almost succeeded. Our location would have been exposed if I weren't using the ghost relay. Natalia put her mug down. This is getting dangerous, Caleb. He looked up. So what do we do? Stop looking. Let them win. His voice didn't tremble, but hers did. No, she whispered. We have to be smarter. Later that day at Sterling and Royce, Natalia entered the executive lounge for the first time. The room was designed for the powerful velvet armchairs, curated whiskey, and a skyline view that made even corruption feel elegant. Elias stood near the window, a tablet in hand. Rough night. He asked, not turning. Natalia kept her tone even. Insomnia runs in my family. He finally looked at her. Something was in his eyes, a flicker of tension, curiosity, and perhaps recognition. Tell me, Miss Jordan, he said, setting the tablet down. How much do you know about cybersecurity? She blinked, keeping her expression composed a bit. I once helped a former boss recover from a phishing breach. Why? Because someone got into our private cloud last night. They were looking for a specific file. Did they find it? He paused. Almost. But I stopped them in time. He stepped closer. The funny thing is, they knew where to look, not just what to look for. That kind of knowledge suggests an inside connection. Natalia smiled. Should I be worried? Should I? He countered. They held each other's gaze. Then Elias said almost too softly, I don't like games. Natalia nodded. Neither do I. But both knew they were already in one.
Chapter.
That evening, Caleb received a message from an anonymous source. Clever boy, but Erebus isn't yours to uncover. Not yet. The architect. Caleb stared at the name. He had never seen it before. He tried to trace the message. It bounced through 11 international servers before evaporating. Whoever this architect was, they were leagues beyond anyone he'd ever encountered. And they were watching him. Meanwhile, Sophia Morgan sat in her private office, a glass of white wine untouched on her desk. Across from her, Daniel Morgan spoke in hushed tones. He almost broke through the Erebus shell, he said. That boy is gifted. Too gifted. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Then deal with it. We can't move too fast. If Elias catches wind of what Erebus really is, he won't. Sophia interrupted because he's distracted by her. You're still convinced I looked into her eyes yesterday, Sophia whispered. There was something ancient, like a mirror I couldn't place. Daniel tilted his head. Emma, or a ghost pretending not to be her sister. Either way, she's dangerous. That night, Natalia opened the Project Ember file. Inside were lines of financial redirection, encrypted research logs, and emails marked, Do Not Forward. It described a joint project between Sterling and Royce Morgan Tech and Dominion Bank. The goal is to obtain exclusive patents from Harris Global before its collapse. It wasn't just about corporate sabotage. It was about theft. Systematic, coordinated, preordained. And someone had made sure no one would survive to tell the story. Her father's downfall wasn't an accident. It was execution. The final page held a date, August 14th, 2019. The night Emma disappeared. Natalia walked into Caleb's room, finding him awake, staring at the ceiling. I think someone just warned me off, he said softly. Someone called the architect. She felt the name lodge in her spine like a thorn. Then we know we're close. Too close. Somewhere across the city, Elias stood on the rooftop terrace of his private residence. The wind tugged at his tie as he looked down at Savannah's glowing lights. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a pair of haunted brown ones. The same eyes once looked up at him from a hotel lobby floor, and the child who looked too much like him to be a coincidence. In the shadows, truths waited, encrypted, forgotten. But Caleb was watching now, and Natalia was ready to burn it all down. The riverfront esplanade wore its dusk like a silk scarf, soft clinging and tinged with melancholy. The cobblestones were slick with evening rain, and the flickering lamps cast long golden reflections onto the water. Somewhere nearby, a violinist played beneath a wrought iron gazebo, the mournful notes winding through the trees like whispered memories. Natalia Harris stood under the curved archway at the park's entrance, her fingers tight around the thin strap of her clutch. She'd nearly turned around twice, heart fluttering with a nervous rhythm she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't here to spy tonight, infiltrate, or pretend. She was here because he'd asked. Elias Sterling, the man who lived behind layers of sharp suits and glacial calm. The man's presence unnerved her, not because of his power, but because of what stirred beneath his control. She said yes when he invited her for a walk, for reasons she still refused to admit. "You came?" His voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned. He was dressed in dark navy, his coat open despite the drizzle, his hands in his pockets, like he didn't feel the cold. The street light behind him traced a halo across his shoulder, softening the edges of a man the world only knew in headlines. "I wasn't sure I would," she said truthfully. "And yet, here you are." They walked. Neither rushed. The city moved around them in slow motion. Carriages rolled by with couples beneath thick blankets. The Savannah River churned softly in its banks, and laughter spilled from restaurants along the edge like candlelight through curtains. "You didn't come from finance, did you?" Elias asked, after a stretch of silence. Natalia looked ahead. "Why do you say that?" "Because you don't speak in margins and models. You ask questions no one else dares ask in boardrooms. You carry yourself like someone who once stood at the top and learned to live without it." She hesitated. "I used to think loss was an ending, but sometimes it's the cleanest kind of beginning." He glanced at her. "That sounds personal." "It is." The rain picked up slightly, brushing against her cheek like a lover's exhale. Elias paused beside a bench beneath an ancient oak. "Would you sit with me?" She did. They watched the river together. For a while they said nothing, just the sound of water wind and violin. Then quietly, Elias spoke. 6 years ago, I woke up in a hotel room with a splitting headache and no memory of how I got there. There was a smear of lipstick on my collar and the scent of champagne on my skin. I remembered fragments, music, laughter, and then a woman crying in an elevator. Natalia felt her breath catch. He looked at her now, eyes sharper. "I always thought it was a dream, but then a week ago, I saw you. And suddenly it wasn't a dream anymore." She kept her voice even. "People remember what they want to, perhaps, but some memories don't give you a choice." Natalia rose, her heart tight. Standing at the overlook's edge, she took a few steps from the bench. Rain slicked the marble rail beneath her fingertips. "Do you believe in fate, Elias?" He approached slowly. "I believe in second chances when they're earned. And what about unfinished stories?" He stood beside her now. "They haunt me." A moment passed, then another. And in the hush between heartbeats, Natalia whispered, I never told anyone what happened that night. Not really. I had too much to lose. Elias turned to her. But you lost it anyway. She nodded. Was there anyone to blame? He asked. She hesitated. Maybe. Maybe not. But I know someone pulled the strings. Someone wanted everything to unravel. He studied her. And you're here to find out who. I'm here, she said, voice low, because I don't want to run anymore. Elias took a small step closer. The rain fell steadier now, dotting his lapel and sliding down her cheek. Neither moved. You intrigue me, Natalia, in ways I don't fully understand. That makes two of us, she replied barely above a whisper. He reached up then, slowly brushing a raindrop from her jaw. You looked familiar the moment you walked into my office. But it wasn't your face. It was the feeling that I was about to remember something I'd tried very hard to forget. She closed her eyes. You held me once. She whispered in a hotel lobby. I was broken, humiliated. And you didn't ask questions. You just helped me stand. Elias said nothing. And then quietly, almost reverently, he said, I remember. They walked again in silence, which no longer felt like distance. The drizzle turned to mist, and Natalia felt something inside her loosen, a knot pulled tight by years of silence and secrets. They stopped at a small pavilion near the riverbank, where paper lanterns flickered beneath the wooden beams. A string quartet played beneath the awning, their instruments protected from the rain, but not from the emotion that filled the air. Elias extended a hand. May I? Natalia looked at him. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. They danced, not with precision, not with practiced grace, but with the tentative closeness that comes when two souls orbit a truth they're afraid to name. His hand settled lightly at her waist. Hers rested near his heart. They moved to the rhythm of strings and silence. You don't flinch when I touch you, he murmured, and you don't apologize for it. Should I not unless it's a lie? He met her gaze. It's not. Their foreheads almost touched. Rain speckled her lashes. His breath was warm against her temple. And just for that moment, the city disappeared. There was no betrayal, no scandal, no questions. Only a man and a woman beneath the hush of rain, relearning the shape of each other. Afterward, he walked her back to her car. The night had grown quieter, the mist turning to dew. They didn't speak of what the dance meant or what it changed, but before she opened the door, Elias gently touched her arm. If you ever need a friend, or something more than a friend, I'm here. Natalia searched his eyes. There was no agenda in them, no manipulation, just an honesty that startled her more than any lie. Thank you, she said. She got into the car, closed the door, and watched him through the window for a long breath before driving off. He didn't move until her taillights disappeared around the corner. That night, Natalia stood in front of her mirror hair still damp dress, clinging slightly from the moisture in the air. She didn't undress, didn't remove her earrings or touch her face. She just stared at her reflection. And she saw a woman who looked whole for the first time in 6 years. Not healed, but healing.
Batiske.
A few miles away, in a darkened office overlooking the same river, William Sterling watched surveillance footage from the pavilion. He watched his son hold a woman with the quiet devotion of a man who knew how fragile happiness could be. His jaw clenched. Behind him, Sophia Morgan entered. They're getting close, she said. William didn't turn. Closer than they should. Sophia stepped beside him. Do we intervene? He didn't answer at first. Then coldly, "Not yet. Let them believe in romance. It'll make the fall sharper." Sophia said nothing, but her fingers curled against the velvet armrest of the chair. There was something about the way Elias looked at Natalia that unsettled her. Something too familiar. Across the city, Caleb watched from the shadows of his room. He had hacked the park's security camera out of instinct, uneasy about letting his mother walk into Elias's world without a trace. But what he saw wasn't danger. It was something far more complicated. Emotion. Connection. He leaned back puzzled. For the first time, he didn't know what to do with the truth. He just knew it was growing. And somewhere inside that truth was something worth protecting. It began with a quiet morning. The kind that promised calm. Natalia had just returned from the corner market, a bag of oranges tucked under one arm, when she felt the stillness. The apartment was too quiet. No cartoons humming from the living room. No soft thumps of Zoe's stuffed animals being lined up in military formation. Just silence. Thick, heavy wrong. She dropped the bag. Caleb, Zoe. No answer. She walked quickly through the apartment. Caleb's laptop was still open, humming faintly lines of code frozen mid-command. The door to their shared bedroom was ajar, the small twin beds untouched. Panic bloomed low in her chest. Then she saw the note, folded neatly on the dining table, printed in thin black letters. "If you want her back, leave Sterling and Royce. No police, no games. One warning." Her knees buckled. She sank into the chair, the world tilting violently. Zoe. Someone had taken Zoe. Across the city, in a darkened van, parked near the industrial district, a small girl sat curled in a corner, her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Zoe wasn't crying. Not yet. Her wide eyes moved between the man behind the wheel and the shadowy figure in the passenger seat, both speaking in clipped tones, their faces obscured by caps and scarves. She clutched her pink bunny tightly. "Where's my brother?" she whispered. No one answered. Natalia didn't call the police. Instead, she called Claire. "They took Zoe," her voice cracked. "Someone took her." Claire didn't hesitate. "Where's Caleb gone? He must have followed them." Claire's voice sharpened. "That boy's brilliant, but he's still just a child. You need help. Real help." Natalia closed her eyes. She saw Elias. The dance. He looked at her as if it were not a game or a mission, but something real. She opened her eyes. "No," she said. "I need to do this myself." 3 hours later, a burner phone rang. Natalia picked it up on the first buzz. A distorted voice spoke. "Check your email. The next instruction is waiting." Then silence. She opened her encrypted account. A single image loaded slowly. Zoe, blindfolded but unharmed, sits on a low warehouse stool. In the background, a rusted green pipe and a graffiti tag she recognized. East Side Docks. She grabbed her coat, but before she could leave, the door opened. Caleb stood there, his face pale, breathing hard. "I found her," he said. "They tried to hide the signal, but I tracked the camera feed." "Where is she?" "Old Warehouse 19. Industrial yard by the river. But they know someone's looking. They're trying to wipe the cameras now." Natalia moved like instinct. She strapped the burner phone into her pocket, slid her stun baton from the drawer, a leftover from her years in Chicago self-defense courses, and looked her son in the eye. "You stay here. Lock the doors. Don't move until I call. I can help." "No. This isn't behind a screen. This is real." He stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. Natalia turned and left without looking back. The warehouse reeked of damp metal and old oil. Natalia moved like a shadow, her breath slow, controlled. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the world in bruised purples and rusted golds. Somewhere inside, her daughter was waiting. She passed a rusted gate boots crunching over gravel. The air was thick, and the silence was punctuated only by the low hum of a generator. Then she heard it. A whimper. She followed the sound, heart pounding, until she reached a side office. The door creaked slightly as she opened it. Zoe was there, alone, untouched, eyes wide. "Mama," she whispered. Natalia rushed forward, knelt and pulled the blindfold away. "Shh, baby, I've got you." But something was wrong. Too easy. The moment she stood with Zoe in her arms, the alarm sounded. Steel doors clanged shut behind her. Natalia turned, shielding Zoe. A man stepped out of the shadows. Mid-30s, clean cut, scar over his left brow. Familiar. One of Sophia's bodyguards. "You weren't supposed to make it this far," he said casually. "Then you don't know me very well," Natalia replied, voice cold. "Leave Sterling and Royce today, or next time we won't leave the kid alone." Natalia narrowed her eyes. "This isn't about Sterling. This is about the file. Erebus. You want me gone because I know something." The man smirked. "Does it matter why we own the city? You're a shadow from a name already buried." Natalia set Zoe down gently. Then she struck. Her first move was swift as spin and elbow to the jaw. He staggered. She followed with a knee to his ribs. He lunged, but she dodged, using the baton to jab his wrist and disarm him. "You fight well," he grunted, swiping at her. "I had a lot to lose." They struggled. He shoved her against the wall, hand at her throat. Her fingers fumbled at her side, then found the baton again. She brought it up sharply. He crumpled. Breathing hard, Natalia turned and scooped Zoe into her arms. "Time to go," she whispered. They ran. Out the door, down the path, toward the rusted gate. And as they burst into the night, headlights blinded her. A sleek black car screeched to a halt. Elias jumped out. "Natalia." She froze. "How did you—" "Caleb called me," he said breathlessly. "Told me where you'd gone. I tracked the warehouse." Natalia swallowed. "Zoe, I see her. Get in. Now." They drove. Fast. Zoe clung to her mother. Elias kept one eye on the road, the other flicking to the rearview mirror. Natalia finally spoke. "They warned me to leave you. To leave the company." Elias tightened his grip on the wheel. "Sophia. Someone was tied to her. Maybe even your father." He wouldn't. But even as he said it, his voice cracked. "We need to find out what's really inside Erebus," Natalia said. "We will. But first." He glanced at her voice, quiet. "First, we protect the people we love." Natalia turned to Zoe, sleeping now in her lap thumb, still wrapped around the ear of her pink bunny. And for the first time since the Harris name fell from Grace, Natalia Harris realized she wasn't fighting alone. Not anymore. Somewhere far away in a penthouse filled with gold and glass, Sophia Morgan threw her phone across the room. She wasn't supposed to survive that. Daniel, seated beside a flickering screen of surveillance footage, frowned. "You were warned. Natalia isn't just another pawn." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "No, she's a threat. A memory comes alive." Daniel tapped the screen. "Then we need to bury her again, deeper this time." Sophia turned. "No, not yet." "Why?" Her voice dropped. "Part of me wants to know why I remember her face." Daniel said nothing, because deep down, he remembered too. The morning after the kidnapping dawned gray and uncertain. Rain clouds loomed over Savannah like unspoken truths, and within the quiet corners of Sterling and Royce, the air felt taut with something unnameable, a sense that the walls themselves had begun to listen. Sophia Morgan stood alone in her office, staring at the full-length mirror behind her desk. Her reflection looked perfect. Crimson lips, porcelain skin, and hair pinned into an immaculate chignon. But something was wrong. She had dreamt again. The same dream. A music box, a girl laughing, a fire, and a name she never spoke aloud. Emma. The whisper escaped her lips before she could catch it. In a quiet townhouse across the city, Natalia sat with Caleb, her fingers brushing absently through Zoe's curls as the girl slept in her lap. Elias stood by the window, speaking in low tones, with a private investigator he had trusted since college. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. She doesn't remember anything, Natalia said softly. Zoe, just that a man brought her juice. Caleb nodded, but his eyes were stormy. I should have stopped them. I was watching. I should have done more. Natalia reached across the table and took his hand. You found her. You got me there in time. You saved your sister. His voice was quiet. What if they come again? Then we'll be ready. Elias turned. We won't wait for them to strike first. We strike back.
Chapter.
Daniel Morgan walked through rows of biometric servers and memory mapping archives in a discreet lab outside the city. He stopped at a door marked Subject 001, EM. Digital scans lined the walls inside neural activity, childhood photographs, psychological conditioning reports. It was all there, cataloged and classified beneath one name, Emma Harris. His sister looked nothing like the girl in those files now. Sophia Morgan had grown into a woman of precision, of cool elegance. But Daniel knew the truth beneath that exterior was a fractured memory, stitched together by science and manipulation. She's starting to remember, he said aloud. The technician beside him didn't look up. How much names, dreams, feelings? Should we begin suppression again? Daniel hesitated. No, he said, not yet. At Sterling and Royce. Sophia wandered into the executive lounge, a crystal tumbler in hand. She didn't pour anything. She just stood, staring out over the river. Elias found her there. You look tired, he said gently. Do I? He stepped beside her. Something on your mind? Sophia hesitated. Do you ever wonder who you were before you became this version of yourself? He studied her. Sometimes. She glanced at him, something like desperation hidden in her gaze. Do you think memory defines us? Or is it just a story we tell ourselves to make sense of chaos? Both can be true. She looked away. I have dreams. Things I can't explain. Faces I've never met. Feelings I can't place. Elias reached toward her arm. Have you talked to someone? A professional? Sophia pulled back. No. Because what if I find out I'm not who I think I am? He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. That evening, Natalia received a package. No return address. Inside a single photograph. 2 girls, 8 or 9. One with wild curls and warm brown skin. The other fair, with a dimpled smile and matching eyes. She turned it over. In faded ink, Nat plus M. Savannah Zoo. Summer 2004. Natalia stared at the photo for a long time, her fingers trembling. Then, without a word, She took it to the desk and placed it beside Caleb's digital scanner. "Can you match her?" Caleb took one look and nodded. Already did. 91% facial match with Sophia Morgan. Age adjusted. "Then it's true," Natalia whispered. "She's Emma, my sister." Caleb looked up. Why doesn't she remember Natalia closed her eyes? Because someone made sure she wouldn't. Sophia walked through the Morgan estate alone late at night. The halls felt cavernous, echoing with a silence she could no longer ignore. She found herself drawn to the old piano in the music room. She sat. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then slowly, a melody emerged. Soft, familiar, a lullaby. One she shouldn't have known. Tears pricked her eyes. She didn't know why. The next morning, Elias summoned Natalia to his office. "We need to talk," he said. "About Sophia." He nodded. "She's unraveling. And she came to me last night, not as a partner, as someone lost." Natalia sat across from him. "I have something." She placed the photo on the desk. Elias picked it up. "That's her," he said as a child. "Her name was Emma Harris, my sister. She disappeared the night our father was destroyed. I thought she was dead, but someone took her, Elias, changed her." He looked at the image again, then at her. "We need proof." Natalia nodded. "And I need to face her." That night, a gala lit up the city. A Sterling and Royce charity affair at the historic Blakely Hall. Guests moved like silk across the marble floors. Champagne flowed like secrets, and the chandeliers gleamed above. Natalia arrived in black velvet, her hair swept back, her eyes steady. She moved through the crowd with purpose, ignoring the whispers. When she saw Sophia across the room, she didn't hesitate. "Miss Morgan," she said coolly. Sophia turned. Her breath caught. For a moment she just stared. Then softly, "Do I know you?" "You used to. You look familiar." Natalia handed her the photograph. Sophia took it. Her hand trembled. She turned it over. Nat plus M, Savannah Zoo. Something fractured. She stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. "I know this. I remember that day, the flamingos. You cried because someone stole your bracelet." Natalia nodded, tears in her eyes. "You used to braid my hair before school. You called me Nat Nat." Sophia sank onto a nearby bench, staring at the photo. "Why don't I remember until now?" "Because someone took you, they changed your name, your face, your mind." "No, that can't be. My father," Daniel said. "Daniel lied. He helped them erase you. But they failed. Because you remember Emma. You remember me." "Sophia, no." Emma looked up, her eyes swimming. "I'm so tired of not knowing who I am." Natalia took her hand. "Then let's find out together." Across the room, Daniel watched. His expression didn't change, but inside he knew the fracture had begun, and there would be no putting her back together this time. Later that night, Natalia walked alone through the back garden of the hall. The air smelled of roses and rain. Elias found her beneath a magnolia tree. "How is she?" he asked. "Broken, but remembering." "What now?" She looked at him. "Now we rebuild piece by piece." He stepped closer. "And what about us?" Natalia smiled, faint but discernible. "One piece at a time." He reached for her hand, and beneath the southern sky, heavy with storm and promise, they stood together. Not as pawns, not as enemies, but as people daring to remember who they were and who they could still become. The Sterling estate sat like a stone crown at the edge of the Savannah bluffs. Built of pale limestone and shadowed by live oaks that had stood for centuries, the mansion exuded power without apology. It was the kind of place where secrets didn't whisper, they carved themselves into marble. Elias hadn't been home in 4 days. When he finally pulled into the winding drive, silence greeted him. No staff, no music, just the echo of his own footsteps on polished stone. His father was waiting in the drawing room. William Sterling didn't rise. He sat by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in one hand, his expression unreadable. "You've been absent," he said without looking up. Elias removed his coat and draped it neatly over the back of a leather armchair. "I've been busy risking everything I built." That's an interesting way of saying falling in love. William's head turned, slowly, deliberately. "This is not about love." Elias met his gaze. "Then what is it about?" "It's about legacy, loyalty, the empire that bears your name. Don't throw that away for a woman with a ruined last name and a vendetta." Elias exhaled. Calm, measured. "Her last name was ruined because you helped destroy it." A flicker in William's eyes. "Don't say things you can't take back, son. Tell me I'm wrong. Look me in the eye and say you weren't involved in Harris Global's collapse." William rose, then slowly, like a man, shedding the weight of age for the sharpness of control. "Everything I did to protect our future. Their patents were vulnerable. Their leadership is unstable. I acted before someone else could. That's what leaders do." Elias stared at him. "You stole from them. You helped destroy a family. I fortified our position. You lied." William took a step closer. "I created a world where you could stand at the top. You don't get to be angry now that the ladder has blood on it." Silence stretched between them. Then Elias said, "I'm stepping down." William blinked. "Excuse me. From the board, from the family trust, from your games. I won't be part of this. You think walking away makes you righteous? No. It makes me free." William's voice dropped to a hiss. "You do this, and I will dismantle everything you've built." Elias gave a faint smile. "Then we finally understand each other." He turned and walked out without waiting for permission. At Natalia's apartment, Caleb was helping Zoe glue paper stars to a shoebox diorama. The scent of lavender and old books filled the air. Natalia was in the kitchen wiping the counter in distracted silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from Elias. "I left the house. He knows everything." She stared at the screen, then slowly typed back, "Are you safe?" His reply came quickly. "Not sure, but I'm clear." She turned off the phone and stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed to her chest. "Net." That night, Elias showed up at her door. No tie, no suit, just dark jeans, a navy sweater, and eyes that looked like they'd carried something heavy a long way. Natalia let him in without a word. They sat on the couch, the air between them soft and quiet. "He offered me everything," Elias said finally, "and I gave it back. For me, for myself. But yes, because of you." She looked at him. "What will he do?" "He'll retaliate. He doesn't lose. And now I'm not a son. I'm a liability." Natalia reached for his hand. "You're not alone in this." He looked at their fingers intertwined, like roots growing into new soil. "That's the only reason I'm still standing." Elsewhere at the Morgan estate, Emma sat in the solarium, watching the night bleed into the horizon. Daniel approached quietly. "You didn't come to the office today." She didn't turn. "I wasn't feeling like Sophia." He paused, And who did you feel like instead? She looked over her shoulder, her eyes glassy. Emma. He sat beside her. You've been remembering more. Every time I close my eyes, every time I hear music, every time I see her face. You don't have to be afraid of what comes next. She studied him. Did you know what they did to me? Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. Two days later, Elias faced the Sterling and Royce board. He stood at the head of the long walnut table, flanked by men and women in suits, who had measured success in quarterly earnings and silence. I'm resigning as CEO effective immediately, he said. Gasps, murmurs. I can't lead a company whose foundation was built on theft. I won't protect a legacy that devours truth. One of the board members leaned forward. What happens to the Sterling name? Elias met her eyes. It will survive, but it won't belong to liars anymore. He walked out of the building, head high, the rain beginning to fall again. That night, in the warmth of Natalia's apartment, Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Caleb assemble a new drone prototype. Zoe giggled nearby, twirling with a paper crown. Natalia watched from the kitchen, a soft smile playing at her lips. He looked up and caught her gaze. Something passed between them then. Not fire, but something deeper. Something built on choice. In a hidden corner of the city, William Sterling stood before a burning fireplace. A glass in his hand, a storm in his eyes. Behind him, a man in a gray suit waited. What now? Sir William spoke without turning. We remind them why the name Sterling doesn't bend. The man nodded. And the girl? She's more trouble than we thought. He sipped his drink. Then let's make sure she never sees the end of this story. The fire roared, and the game reset itself. But this time, the players were different. And some of them had already stopped playing by the rules. It was the silence between seconds that revealed everything. Late one evening, in the glow of a single desk lamp, Caleb Harris sat in the center of a digital storm. Strings of code blinked across his monitor, like constellations' logic stitched into chaos. Natalia stood nearby, arms crossed, tension etched in the delicate curve of her shoulders. They had found the key. Hidden in a subdirectory beneath what looked like harmless Sterling and Royce payroll reports was a file embedded with a cryptographic lock. Not just encrypted, encoded with a cipher known only to government systems. And behind it, a project so secret it had been renamed 5 times across 3 continents. Erebus. Caleb's fingers moved like shadows. He wasn't hacking anymore. He was unmasking. Natalia leaned closer. Are you sure it's safe? He didn't look away from the screen. There's no such thing as safe. Only worth it. A final keystroke. The file opened. The contents rendered slowly images, spreadsheets, voice memos. But at the heart of it was a series of internal memos between William Sterling, Daniel Morgan, and Nathan Hudson, labeled only S-37, Harris Containment Protocol. Natalia read aloud, her voice calm but shaking beneath the surface. Objective: acquire Harris Global's energy patent portfolio under manufactured insolvency. Remove public trust in leadership via financial scandal. Secure Emma Harris for behavioral reprogramming. Her voice broke. Secure Emma Harris. Caleb looked up at her wide-eyed. Natalia stared at the screen. They didn't just erase my father. They erased her. Elias arrived just before dawn. He looked at the open file and sank into the chair beside her. His hands folded, his jaw locked. He planned everything he said, not just business. People, identities, entire futures. Natalia turned to him. We have to show her. Elias nodded. She deserves the truth. Emma Morgan stood in the center of the music room, bare feet on cold marble, her reflection blurred in the glossy surface of the grand piano. Natalia stood a few steps behind the folder in her hand. You were taken, Natalia said. Not adopted, not protected, taken. Emma didn't move. Natalia stepped closer. You were reprogrammed, conditioned and given memories that weren't yours. Emma's voice was barely audible. They told me my parents died in a fire, that I was rescued, that Daniel saved me. They lied because you had something they needed, a name, a bloodline, a door to open the vault of my father's research. Natalia handed her the folder. Emma opened it slowly. She read. And as the truth unfolded on paper, the woman known as Sophia Morgan began to tremble. I remember, she whispered. He said I had nightmares. But they weren't nightmares. They were memories. Natalia moved beside her. I don't want to take anything from you, but you deserve to know who you are. Emma closed the folder. My name is Emma Harris, and I want to see him. The confrontation was arranged in secret. An abandoned observatory on the outskirts of town, long since claimed by vines and wind. Inside, the great dome ceiling, still opened to the stars. Emma waited by the rusted telescope. Daniel entered with a slow, careful step. He didn't feign surprise. You remember? Emma turned. I remember everything. He took another step. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. Then why does it? Daniel sighed. You were in danger. After your father's collapse, everyone wanted a piece of what was left. They would have used you. And what did you do, Daniel? You used me first. You wiped my memories. You made me into someone else. He didn't answer. Emma stepped forward. Did you ever love me at all? His silence was the answer. Elsewhere, William Sterling stood before the fireplace in his private office, a bourbon decanter untouched on the table. Elias entered without knocking. It's over, Elias said. William turned. You think one file will end me? No, but it will unmask you. And once the mask is gone, power fades. William took a step forward. You chose her over your blood. I chose truth over shadows. You were never meant for this world. Elias met his father's gaze. Then let it burn. That afternoon, Natalia held a press conference outside the courthouse. She didn't speak of revenge. She talked of restoration, of family, of names stolen and voices silenced. The evidence was submitted. The board of Sterling and Royce was dissolved by emergency vote. An independent investigation was launched into Dominion Bank and Morgan Technologies. Inside the crowd, Emma stood beside her, no longer hiding. No longer Sophia. Just Emma. The four sat in Natalia's apartment that night, a strange unspoken peace between them. Caleb worked quietly on a schematic for a security patch. Zoe traced drawings into the steam on the window. Natalia poured tea. Elias lit a fire. Emma watched the flames dance. I used to be afraid of the dark, she said quietly. Now it's the light that terrifies me. Natalia passed her a cup. We get used to it in time, Emma took it. I want to testify for the record. I like the truth on paper, not just code. Elias nodded. We'll stand with you. For the first time, Emma smiled. It was tentative, but real. Caleb knocked on the study door just before midnight. Natalia opened it. Can't sleep. He held up a flash drive. There's something else in the Erebus file. A dormant subroutine. It was meant to auto-activate if someone tried to delete the main content. She took the drive, frowning. What does it do? It pings a server offshore. Sends a backup. But this version, it has names. More names. More companies. Natalia stared at him. You mean it wasn't just about Harris Global? Caleb nodded. It never was. Miles away in a cold chamber lit by surgical light, a woman in a black suit stared at a blinking red message on her terminal. ER7 restored. Her eyes narrowed. She picked up the phone. It's begun. We leak. A pause. Then activate Protocol Black. The line went dead, and a new game began. The storm had passed. For the first time in weeks, the air in Savannah was soft again, kissed by sunlight instead of suspicion. Spring had begun to show itself in trembling buds on tree branches and the scent of jasmine drifting through open windows. Inside a sun-drenched cafe overlooking the river, Emma Harris sat across from Natalia, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of chamomile. Her hair, once curled into tight, pristine waves, now hung loosely around her face. She looked younger somehow, not in years, but in weight, like a woman who had stopped pretending she belonged to someone else's script. Emma said softly, "The first memory I got back was of your voice. Not words, just the sound of you laughing. I didn't know what it meant. It scared me." Natalia reached across the table, gently squeezing her hand. "I used to tell you bedtime stories every night. Even when you were too old for them, you always asked for one more." Emma smiled faintly. "That may be why I dreamed in metaphors." They sat silently, not because there was nothing to say, but because forgiveness is never rushed. It grows in the quiet spaces. "Do you hate me?" Emma asked. Natalia looked at her long and steady. "I never hated you. I hated the silence. I hated waking up and not knowing where you were, and I hated myself for not being able to find you." Emma blinked fast. "But I chose to stay. When Daniel gave me the choice to remember or not, I hesitated. That's what keeps me up at night." Natalia didn't flinch. "You were surviving the only way you knew how. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human." A single tear slipped down Emma's cheek. Natalia reached over and wiped it away. Later that day, they visited the old Harris family home, what remained of it. The structure was still intact, but time had softened the edges. The paint had faded. The garden had overgrown. But the bones were strong. Zoe ran ahead with a pink ribbon trailing from her hand, and Caleb followed his backpack filled with a camera, notebooks, and a small drone. Emma paused in the foyer. "I dreamed about this place for years," she said. "But every time the doors were locked." Natalia stepped in beside her. "Then open them now. Let them stay open." Emma wandered slowly, touching the edge of the staircase, the frame of a long-forgotten photo. She stopped before the piano, its keys dust-covered but still intact. She sat and played a lullaby, the same one she used to hum under her breath back when she was just a girl in oversized pajamas, legs swinging off the bench. Natalia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes damp. Elias arrived near dusk. He had spent the day in quiet meetings with regulators, journalists, and lawyers. There were fires to put out, yes. However, new frameworks are also being laid out. The Sterling name would no longer be a weapon. It would be a responsibility. He entered the garden to find Natalia seated on the swing, with Zoe in her lap, braiding ribbons into the little girl's curls. Caleb sat nearby, sketching something in a notebook, a blueprint of sorts. Elias crossed the grass and paused. "You look like you belong here." Natalia turned. "I may do it for the first time." He crouched beside her. "I came to ask something." "Yes." "Can we start again?" Not as pieces trying to fit into old shapes, but as something new. Clean. She looked at him. "You mean as strangers with history?" "No," he said softly. "As something more dangerous. Honest people in love." She laughed, the sound light and real. "That might be the riskiest thing we've done yet." That evening, Emma stood before the press. Her statement was clear. There were no dramatics, no vendettas, just truth. She recounted her abduction, the psychological reconditioning, the years lost under someone else's name. She didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because she had already grieved. Now she was choosing to rebuild. She ended her speech with a simple line. "My name is Emma Harris, and I am reclaiming every part of me that was taken." The crowd was silent, and then it wasn't. Not with noise, but with understanding. Days passed like petals falling. In the slowness of healing, new things began to grow. Elias and Natalia co-founded the Harris Sterling Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, protecting intellectual property rights, and sponsoring ethical innovation. Caleb, with his uncanny precision, was named a junior advisor to the Foundation's cybersecurity division. Emma began therapy, Zoe began school, and Natalia, she began to breathe again. One afternoon, Natalia stood beneath the magnolia tree where she and Elias had once danced in the rain. He approached quietly, slipping something small and silver into her hand. A key. "It's not just a house," he said. "It's everything I want to build with you." She looked up at him. "Then I hope you're ready for walls with history." He smiled. "Only if we painted them together."
Chapter.
That night they sat on the back porch of the newly restored Harris home. Feet bare, wine glasses untouched, the scent of gardenia lingering in the humid air. Elias leaned back. "Do you believe in fate now?" Natalia rested her head on his shoulder. "No, but I believe in choices, and I'm glad we made ours." He reached for her hand, not with desperation, but with quiet certainty. And beside them, Zoe slept soundly in her room. Caleb typed lines of code upstairs, his headphones soft with music. Emma walked the garden alone, barefoot in the moonlight, humming a lullaby she hadn't known she still remembered. There were still cracks in the foundation, still questions, still names are left to unearth from Erebus's ghost files. But for now, in this sliver of time, in this fragile, radiant stillness, they had what once seemed impossible. A beginning. Not perfect, but honest, and fiercely theirs. Caleb was the last to leave the library that night. The rain had returned to Savannah, not a storm, but a quiet drizzle that turned the windows into watercolor paintings. The house was nearly silent, save for the soft rustle of trees and the distant hum of a jazz vinyl. Emma had forgotten to turn off downstairs. It was just past midnight. The others had gone to sleep hours ago. He should have been asleep too. But something had kept him awake. A pulse beneath his fingertips, an itch in his mind. His laptop screen still glowed, and the code he'd been tinkering with ran in the background. He wasn't working on anything urgent, but exploring and searching for ghosts. Then the email appeared. No subject line, no sender, no timestamp, just a line of text. You only think the game is over. Little genius. Caleb stared at it. Then another line appeared. They made your mother forget. What makes you think they haven't made you remember wrong? His chest tightened. He leaned closer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. A third line followed. Check the subroutine you overlooked in Sterling's firewall logs, port 5901. He opened a secure terminal. The system was clean. He had checked it a dozen times, but not that port. He traced the signal eyes narrowing as the digital threads unfolded like spider silk. The source, an old offshore server cluster from Vienna, one he had pinged a year ago, back when he first started trying to dig into Erebus. A fourth line blinked into existence. He left a piece of Erebus behind, buried in the Sterling archive, and you're the only one who can find it. Caleb reached for his notebook, flipping to a clean page. His pulse was racing now, and not from fear, from certainty. This wasn't spam. It wasn't noise. It was a message meant only for him. A message from someone who knew the system like he did. A peer. Or something else. Across the hallway, Natalia stirred in her sleep. She didn't know why, only that something had shifted. She rose, wrapping herself in a soft robe and stepping barefoot into the hallway. The house was still. Elias was in deep sleep beside her, one arm curled loosely where she'd been moments ago. Light spilled from under the library door. When she opened it, she found Caleb fully alert, screens glowing with lines of cascading code. "It's late," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "I couldn't sleep." She stepped closer, noticing the strain in his eyes. "What is it, baby?" He hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. Natalia read the message, slowly, twice. The weight in her stomach was immediate. "You think it's real?" Caleb said. "It used my internal access protocol, which I never published. The only 3 people in the world would know." She sat beside him, her mind running through names, through threats she thought had long been buried. Who would send this? Someone who knows about Erebus. Someone who wants me to keep digging. Natalia looked at him, heart tightening. He was only 7. But already far older in mind than he should have ever needed to be. Morning came gray and reluctant. Over breakfast, Caleb shared the email with Elias, Emma, and Daniel. It could be bait. Elias said, brows furrowed. It could be someone trying to reopen a door we've sealed. Or Emma added, it could be someone on the inside who wants to help. Daniel leaned back, lips pressed together. And a defunct Sterling R&D team used port 5901 6 years ago, around the time of the Johnson collapse. Natalia met Elias's gaze. You said your father ran a special tech unit in Austria before he stepped down. Could this be tied to that? Elias nodded slowly. They built predictive systems, pattern recognition engines. Some were borderline invasive. Experimental AI, Caleb asked. Exactly. What if part of Erebus wasn't just human decisions? Caleb said, voice quiet. What if it were guided? Emma looked up sharply. You mean something else has been watching us all this time? Caleb nodded. They decided to follow the trail, not to react in fear, but to uncover what was buried. That night, Elias escorted Caleb to the Sterling data vault, a climate-controlled underground chamber beneath the new HQ. He entered alone while Elias waited above. Caleb plugged in, navigated to the port. What he found wasn't a virus. It wasn't surveillance. It was a message. Project Argus. A backup drive flashed to life. On it, archived footage, conversations, documents, time-stamped, encrypted, and hidden behind biometric barriers. Caleb bypassed in seconds. Faces of people he'd never seen. But one caught his eye. A woman. Dark curls, amber eyes, a scar just beneath her jawline. Subject A. Harris. He froze. His grandmother, Natalia's mother. Missing since the collapse. Presumed dead. But in this footage, she was very much alive. Speaking to someone off camera, she said that if they get this far voice tense, they've started unraveling it. Good. But tell them this Erebus was only a test.